Once we're in SketchUp, we'll go ahead and import those contour lines. So I'll go to import, choose that file that we exported out of Civil 3D, and we will also choose our options here and make sure that we are not preserving the drawing origin. I don't want to preserve the drawing origin in this case because the UCS in CAD may be 1,000 feet or 1,000 miles away from where the UCS is here in SketchUp, and would put the model really far away from the center of the model. So I'll just go ahead and import. Plus we have the referenced object in here to line things up. When it pulls it in here, it tells me there's 4 layers. It gives me the summary. It's also not barking at me that I can't import. If it gives you the error that it cannot import, it's probably because you have it in the newest version of AutoCAD, which is not going to be supported by the current version of SketchUp. I'll hit close, and what you see here, the model comes in. It's pretty close to the origin. We'll go ahead and get rid of Stacy here, that little model. You also see here that referenced object is sitting down here. It's sitting right there 0 because we actually have that at the 0 level. And we see our surface on top. We're going to keep all of that together. We're going to keep that as one group because I want to make sure that we don't move this around, or at least I can always line this back up if things do get moved around when we bring it back into Civil 3D for that surface calculation. So first thing I want to do is actually use the Toposhaper plugin. When you open up SketchUp in our labs, you probably see a bunch of plugins in there. Unfortunately, we can't control that. But what you can do is we're going to just use this Toposhaper plugin. If the Toposhaper plugin is not there, you can just right-click on the menu bar, browse for Toposhaper in this menu, and have it show up in here. If it's not installed, then we have to install it. But all the lab machines should have it installed. Toposhaper is a free plugin you can get online. So if you're working on home, you can always download that as well. I am going to go ahead and select all of these contours and choose the Toposhaper plugin, or generate the quad mesh and the first option here on that plugin. The reason why I'm using Toposhaper over the built-in sandbox tools of SketchUp is it's going to create a very smooth surface. The dialog of Toposhaper is something to be desired. It's very, very confusing. It has a lot of other add-ons, a lot of options up here, which I actually don't know every piece up there. But the only thing I'm going to worry about is calculating the terrain. So I'll go and click the terrain. It gets even more complicated after we click this button, because what it's going to do is actually create like this little scratch space over here. You can see it kind of referencing. And what it's doing, it's calculating that surface. It's also telling us that the grid is 50 by 23. And that 50 by 23 means that there's 50 squares this direction and 23 squares in this direction. If we want higher resolution, if we want to show this landform in more detail, we can increase this grid number. So maybe it's 100 by whatever that turns into. That would actually give us more resolution. I found that the more resolution you increase in here, sometimes it actually shows some weird artifacts on the surface based on incorrect contour information. So for the most part, I'll just generate it as a 50 foot or 50 point grid, and I'll go and generate the terrain. Once I click generate the terrain, it's done. There's no fanfare here, no fireworks, nothing that tells me it's done. All I do is click on the select tool. It is now a completed terrain. It does create this little bottom part of it, which is sometimes desirable, but in our case, we really don't want that. We're just going to go and double click on this, and there's 2 groups. You've got the bottom skirt, so I double clicked it again, and this is the one I want to delete. I want to keep that other contour surface by itself, but I also want to remove these existing contour lines that we brought in. I'm not going to go and delete them. I'll just go and turn them off because they came in as a layer name. So we actually have our contours here under the default tray at the bottom. We have our major and minor contours. We're just going to turn those things off. And now what you see here is we have a very smooth surface with that. You can see our hillside, a very smooth surface that we can work with. It's pretty coarse, I'll admit. You can experiment with the higher resolutions by maybe typing it to the 100. I didn't go ahead and do that, but it gives us a more coarse but smooth, uniform surface. We're going to add more detail to these areas so we can sculpt it better. So it'll get a lot better once we start shaping this.